Hello everyone and welcome back to another Wizard 101 video. Today, I figured I would go over a very old video I made, right? And I figured I'd do it over again to make it a bit better. And I figured I could do this with a few of my older videos, because definitely some of my older videos are like pretty bad. So, I'd remake them, make them a little bit better, a bit more updated, and a bit just overall more polished. So that's what I'm going to do today, starting with the Loremaster guide. Now, there's a double reason for doing this. The second is that if you're a death, you're going to be wanting farm Loremaster right now because of Headless Horseman. You have the entire month of October to do it, and the drop rate is pretty common, so go for it. So before I get into the actual drops themselves and why you'd want to be farming this, let's go over how to farm it, because there's a pretty good... You want to know what you're doing before actually going into it. So the Loremaster has 6,000 health, I believe now, and each of her minions have about 1,000. Now what you're going to want to be doing is, realistically, you're going to be farming this at a level where you have a 4-pip AoE. If you're death and you don't have a 4-pip AoE, then use Feint on Loremaster. That's usually the best alternative. But if you're any other wizard, you want to use a hit all spell, or at least make sure one person is using a hit all spell so that they can kill all of the minions. You want to get the minions out first round, definitely. If you don't have a high level, multiple people are going to want to attack with 4-pip hit all spells. So, for example, on my death, I always go in and cast Ship of Fools first round. Fire, I always cast Meteor Strike first round. And then from there, I'll wait because I obviously don't have the pips. And usually you can finish Loremaster within 2 or 3 rounds, even with low levels. So, for example, as a death, I've gone in many times already for Headless Horseman, and quite a few of those runs were me at 140 and then 3 level 30s. And every single time I did it like that, I did it in 2 rounds. Or 3 rounds. So either way, it worked out fine. It's just a matter of knowing what you're doing, and you either want to use Feint or a hit all spell. So now that that's out of the way, let's go over into why you would actually do this, starting with Fire. Now, Fire can get 3 spells technically from Loremaster. It can get Brimstone Revenant, it can get Hephaestus, and it can get Krampus. Krampus is a holiday only, Christmas only. You can only get it in Christmas and July. And ultimately, I would say Fire has one of the least reasons to actually do Loremaster. Brimstone Revenant isn't really good. It can be decent for PvP, I'd imagine, because it puts that trap up. But it actually does some solid damage for a 4-pip spell. So if you want a good 4-pip spell that can hit things, Brimstone Revenant wouldn't be a bad idea to go for. In Hephaestus, I would say it's just kind of useless because of the 5 pips. Usually 5-pip spells tend to be a bit worse. So ultimately, I would say Fire doesn't really have a reason. Krampus is kind of bad as well. Moving on to our next, which is Ice. Ice has Angry Snow Pigs, Handsome Fomori, and Winter Moon. All of these are pretty bad spells, I would say. Angry Snow Pigs has the Steel Ward one and does a little bit of damage. It's 4-pip spells, so you might want that. But ultimately, I would say Ice also has really no reason to farm Loremaster. Next is Storm. Storm has 3 spells, which are Catalan, Hammer of Thor, and Queen Calypso. Queen Calypso has a problem where the spell animation takes about an hour and a half, so I would say don't use it just for that reason. Hammer of Thor can be pretty good because it removes a weakness on you first and then attacks, so if you have a weakness on you, it might be a good idea to use that. Maybe keep it in your deck. It can be useful. Catalan also has a really long animation, but it does a solid 700 damage with a minus 25 accuracy. I would say Storm. Realistically, get Hammer of Thor if you can, but the other spells aren't too necessary in regard to Loremaster, but you can get them if you want to. Next would be Myth. Myth has 4 spells you can get from Loremaster, which are Athena Battlesight, Grendel's Amends, Keeper of the Flame, and Ninja Pigs. Now, I'd say Myth actually has some pretty solid spells. Athena is kind of meh. I think all of the Aquila ones are pretty decently bad. But Grendel's Amends can be interesting and unique in that it can heal you, and it heals you for quite a lot. 675 is pretty good. So I would recommend maybe at least getting that just in case and keeping it in your deck. Keeper of the Flame can be pretty good because it does solid damage for a 4-pip spell, but ultimately I would say it's not too useful. It's similar to Brimstone Revenant, just does a bit less damage. And finally, Ninja Pigs is actually pretty solid in the damage category, so maybe you'd want to get that just for the really high damage output it offers. Next is Life, and I'd say Life ultimately has one of the biggest reasons to farm for Loremaster for a few reasons. So, the two pretty bad spells that they can get is Goat Monk, which does a decent amount of damage, but really isn't worth it. And then Luminous Weaver, which I imagine could be pretty good for PvP, does a solid 370 damage with a minus 25% weakness to it, which is pretty good. But the two spells that you really want to get from Loremaster as a life are Pigsy and Rat Spin. Now, Pigsy is a 4-pip heal all spell, so it's like an upgraded unicorn, and it heals for 550. It's really good, really solid, and ultimately as a life you're going to be wanting it. The other spell that you want to get is Rat Spin, and Rat Spin is the 4-pip AoE spell for life. So it's Life's Ship of Fools, Life's Meteor Strike, all that, and it actually does as much damage as Meteor Strike, which is really cool as well. It is one of the highest damaging hit all spells, and technically it can get even higher damage if you upgrade its path to the 350-381, making it the best 4-pip AoE in the entire game. So I would say Rat Spin is definitely worth it to get, especially if you want to quest through the game solo. Really worth it to get it. And from Rat Spin, you can also farm it from King Boar in Grizzleheim, which is probably an easier way to get it than Loremaster itself. But Loremaster might not be bad if you want to actually craft the spell. So Life definitely has reason to do Loremaster. Next is Death, and Death has 3 spells that they can get from Loremaster. They can get Deer Knight, Lord of the Night, and then Headless Horseman. Now, Deer Knight is obviously worth it to get. It's going to be the lowest pip AoE that you can get in the game. Obviously, Ship of Fools is not farmable yet, so I can't say that Ship of Fools is easy to get. You can get, actually, Deer Knight is pretty easy to craft, even in of itself. She drops Deer Knight TCs pretty frequently. You can see I actually have 5 here. I don't know if this technically counts as one. It has a different amount of damage to it, but I already have 5. So you can see just from farming randomly, I already have enough to almost craft Deer Knight again, and its recipe is really easy. Definitely you're going to want to farm Loremaster for at least the TC, and if you get the spell, even better. It'll be really good for you, really helpful. Lord of the Night is useless. It's like just a slightly improved vampire, so don't even bother going for it. I really don't think it's that useful. And then Headless Horseman is actually a really good spell, and you're going to be wanting to farm for that as Death. I said that at the beginning of the video, but I'm going to stress it now. It does 530 to like 560 damage with 4 pips. That means it is the highest damage per 4 pips spell in the entire game, and it does, you can see here, it does more than Skeletal Pirate for 1 pip less, which is kind of crazy. So ultimately you want to get Headless Horseman if you can. And its drop rate is increased compared to the other spells, so now's your chance to go for it during the month of October. Finally is Balance, and I'd say Balance has a kind of it's hit or miss with the spells. It has Loremaster, Ninja Piglets, Samurai, and Savage Paw. Loremaster can be decently useful. It does a little bit of damage, and then it puts a minus 15% weakness and a minus 25% accuracy, so it's rather a utility spell. You have Ninja Piglets, which I actually have here on my Death. You can see got it from Loremaster. Does 420 damage to 510 damage. Ultimately, I would say it's the Headless Horseman type of Balance. It does quite a bit of damage for 4 pips, not nearly as good as Headless Horseman, but it might be worth it to get it just in case. It's a good spell to carry in your deck for something like Detritus if someone fails to kill something or whatever, to do like a little bit of damage, not too much, but a decent amount for a little amount of pips. You have Samurai, which I wouldn't say is worth it at all. It is only very slightly better than Ninja Piglets. You can see here it does like an average of 30 damage higher, and it costs a full pip higher. So Samurai is definitely not worth it. And finally you have Savage Paw, which does a flat 500 and gives you a 25 blade to the next spell. Not too bad, but definitely not nearly as good. So that is all of the different types of spells in the game that you can get from Loremaster. I would say that just going over it again, Death, Life, Balance, and maybe Myth have the best spells to get Fire is definitely not worth it at all. If you're a fire, you really don't want to get any of the spells. Ice, pretty much the same case as fire. Storm is like kind of a hit or miss, really, but most of the spells are kind of meh. So ultimately, I would say that that is what you want to do for Loremaster. So hopefully you all enjoyed. Let me know if you agree with me in the comment section below. Do you agree with my assessment on each of the spells? If not, let me know why. Like, do you think Brimstone Revenant's a good spell maybe? And it's actually definitely worth it to get on fire. So that's it for today. Thank you all for watching. See you in the next video. Adios.